The flames consumed her name first. Éloïse Marchette watched through the iron bars of her cell as Alpha Gaspard Beaumont held the sacred pack registry over the ceremonial fire. His jaw set like granite, his eyes reflecting nothing but cold, calculated hatred. "By the ancient rites of the Crescent Moon Pack," he declared, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard where 300 wolves stood frozen, "I hereby erase this woman from our history. She never existed. She was never mated. She never carried my heir." The parchment caught, curling black at the edges, and Éloïse felt something inside her chest crack. Not her heart, no, that had shattered hours ago when the guards had dragged her from her chambers in nothing but her sleeping gown. But the thing that cracked now was far more dangerous. It was her hope. And in its place, something darker began to grow. She pressed both palms against her rounded belly. 5 months along, they had told her just yesterday, and made a silent vow to the child growing within her. "They will remember my name. And they will learn it from your lips." Before we dive deeper into this story of betrayal, survival, and the tiny claws that rewrote history, I need to ask you something. Are you comfortable? Do you have your tea, your coffee, your midnight snack? Because this story runs deep, and once it takes hold of you, you will not want to look away. Like and subscribe if you want to witness how a forgotten woman became the most powerful memory in this pack's history. And tell me, drop it in the comments, what city are you watching from so I can send you a hug? Because trust me, by the end of this tale, we are all going to need one. Now let us go back to the beginning, to the moment when everything changed. 6 months before the burning of her name, Éloïse Marchette had been nothing more than a healer's daughter from the Ashwood territory, a small pack nestled in the forgotten valleys where the old forests still whispered with ancient magic. She had never expected to find her mate. She had certainly never expected him to be royalty. The day Gaspard Beaumont walked into her father's healing cottage, blood streaming from a wound across his ribs, she had felt the bond snap into place like a physical blow. It had knocked the breath from her lungs, sent her stumbling backward into a shelf of dried herbs that crashed to the floor in an explosion of lavender and rosemary. He had felt it too. She saw it in the way his golden eyes widened, in the way his wolf rose to the surface so quickly that his pupils elongated. His canines descended. "Mate," he had breathed. And despite every warning her mother had given her about powerful men, despite every story her grandmother had told about wolves who wore crowns instead of hearts, Éloïse had believed him. She had loved him. For 3 perfect months she had loved him with everything she had. Gaspard would visit in secret, always at night, always through the hidden paths that wound through the ancient oaks. He said it was for her protection, that his pack was not ready to accept a common healer as their future Luna, that he needed time to prepare them. And Éloïse, blinded by the bond, intoxicated by his touch, had accepted every excuse. When he finally marked her, biting into the junction of her neck and shoulder under a canopy of stars, she had wept with joy. The bond solidified, singing between them like a golden thread, and she had thought, naively, foolishly, that nothing could ever separate them now. She was wrong. The trouble began with a name. Marguerite Delacroix. The first time Éloïse heard it, she was brushing her hair in the small guest chamber Gaspard had arranged for her in the western wing of the packhouse, far from the main quarters, hidden from curious eyes. "The wedding preparations are nearly complete," a maid was saying to another in the hallway, unaware that the door stood slightly ajar. Lady Marguerite's dress arrived from the capital. Pure white silk, embroidered with silver thread. They say it cost more than most wolves earn in 5 years. Éloïse's brush stilled mid-stroke. "Alpha Gaspard certainly knows how to choose them," the second maid giggled. "I heard Lady Marguerite's father controls the entire northern trade route. This marriage will make the Crescent Moon Pack the wealthiest in all the territories." Marriage. The word echoed in Éloïse's skull as she slowly lowered the brush, as her reflection in the mirror seemed to shift into something she no longer recognized. Marriage. But Gaspard was already mated. To her. She bore his mark. She carried his scent. She was his, and he was hers, bound by the sacred laws that had governed wolfkind since the first moon rose over the first pack. There had to be a mistake. She clung to that thought as she fled through the servants' corridors, as she burst into Gaspard's private study without knocking, as she found him standing over a table spread with wedding invitations. His signature freshly dried on dozens of cream-colored cards. Eloise. His voice held no warmth. His eyes, those golden eyes that had once looked at her with such tenderness, now regarded her with something that looked almost like irritation. You should not be here. Tell me it is not true. Her voice cracked on the words. Tell me you are not marrying another woman. Tell me these invitations are for someone else's wedding, that this is some kind of political game I do not understand. It is true. 3 words. 3 words to destroy everything she had believed. Gaspard turned back to the invitations, straightening a stack with casual precision. Marguerite Delacroix will become my Luna in 3 weeks. The arrangements have been in place for over a year. Surely you did not think. He paused, and a small, cruel smile curved his lips. Ah, you did. You thought I would make you Luna. You marked me. Eloise touched the scar on her neck, still tender, still fresh. You claimed me. By every law of our kind. Laws can be rewritten. Gaspard's smile faded, replaced by something cold and hard. And marks can be managed. The Council recognizes political unions above all others. Marguerite brings territory, wealth, and pure bloodlines stretching back 12 generations. You bring what exactly? The ability to mix herbs. A father who can barely afford to keep his cottage standing. Each word was a knife, sliding between her ribs with surgical precision. I brought you my heart, Eloise whispered. I brought you my trust. I brought you my... Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, and she saw his eyes track the movement, saw his jaw tighten. Do not, he said softly, dangerously. Tell me you are pregnant. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. 3 weeks, Gaspard said finally, turning away. You have 3 weeks to terminate the pregnancy and leave my territory. My beta will provide you with enough gold to establish yourself somewhere far from here. You will speak of this to no one. If you do. He looked at her over his shoulder, and she saw the wolf in his eyes, the alpha, the monster she had never allowed herself to see. I will destroy you, Eloise. I will destroy your father. I will burn everything you love until there is nothing left but ash and memory. Eloise did not terminate the pregnancy. She could not. Whatever Gaspard had become, whatever lies he had told, the child growing inside her was innocent. This baby had not chosen its father, had not asked to be caught in the web of politics and betrayal that surrounded its conception. And more than that, more than anything, Eloise realized that she wanted this child. Not as a bargaining chip, not as a way to hold on to Gaspard, but simply because it was hers. A piece of herself that no one could take away. So she ran. Or at least she tried to. They caught her at the border of the territory, dragged her back to the packhouse in chains that burned against her skin, and threw her before Gaspard like a hunting trophy. The wedding had taken place while she was fleeing. Marguerite Delacroix, now Marguerite Beaumont, stood at Gaspard's side, her white silk gown pristine, her dark hair coiled in an elaborate arrangement of braids and silver pins. She looked at Eloise with an expression of mild distaste, as if someone had tracked mud across her clean floors. So this is the healer's daughter, Marguerite murmured. I expected something more. Impressive. She is nothing, Gaspard replied, not even bothering to look at Eloise. A mistake I am in the process of correcting. And the pregnancy will be dealt with. Eloise's blood ran cold. You cannot. Even you, even an alpha, cannot force me to. I am not going to force you to do anything. Gaspard's voice was almost gentle, which made it so much worse. You are going to be held in the cells beneath the packhouse until you give birth. The child will be taken from you the moment it draws its first breath. And then... He finally looked at her, and there was nothing in his eyes. No recognition, no memory of the nights they had spent wrapped around each other, no echo of the love he had once claimed to feel. Then you will be executed for trespassing on Alpha territory and attempting to kidnap a royal heir. Kidnap. Eloise choked on the word. It is my child. It is the child of an Alpha, Gaspard corrected. And therefore property of the pack. You are nothing but the vessel that carried it. He gestured to the guards. Take her away. And notify the council that we will require their presence for the name-burning ceremony. I want this woman erased from history before the child arrives. That was when Éloïse understood. This had never been about politics. It had never been about Marguerite's wealth or her bloodlines or her father's trade routes. Those were convenient excuses, nothing more. The truth was simpler and far more devastating. Gaspard had never loved her. He had wanted an heir, a legitimate heir, one born of a mate bond rather than a political marriage. The bond with Marguerite was hollow, everyone knew it. Political unions rarely produced true mate connections. Any child born of that marriage would always carry the stigma of its artificial origins. But a child born of a true mate bond, that child would be unquestionable. That child would carry the full force of alpha blood, undiluted and pure. And Éloïse, poor, trusting, stupid Éloïse, had given him exactly what he wanted. Now he needed to dispose of her. The cells beneath the Crescent Moon pack house had been built centuries ago, when the pack was smaller and crueler, when disputes were settled with blood rather than words. The walls were thick stone, impervious to sound, and the only light came from a single torch that the guards replaced once a day. Éloïse lost track of time. Days blurred into weeks. Weeks might have been months. She measured her pregnancy in the swelling of her belly, in the increasingly powerful kicks that woke her in the middle of the night, in the way her back ached and her ankles swelled and her wolf, poor, trapped, desperate creature, howled ceaselessly against the walls of her mind. They fed her enough to keep her alive. They gave her water. They did not speak to her, did not acknowledge her questions or her pleas or her threats. She was a ghost already, waiting only for the official ceremony to make it true. The night before the name-burning, a visitor came. Éloïse heard the footsteps first, lighter than the guards, hesitant in a way that military boots never were. She pulled herself upright, pressing her back against the cold stone wall, and watched as a figure emerged from the shadows. Geneviève Beaumont, Gaspard's younger sister, barely 18, with the same golden eyes as her brother but none of his cruelty. Éloïse remembered her from the few pack gatherings she had attended in secret, a quiet girl who spent most of her time in the library, who always seemed to be watching the world with a mixture of curiosity and sadness. "You should not be here," Éloïse said. Her voice was rusty from disuse. "I know." Geneviève knelt before the bars, her skirts pooling around her like spilled moonlight. "I know I should not. But I had to see you. I had to tell you." She broke off, biting her lip, and for a moment she looked so young, so lost. "I am sorry. I am so sorry for what my brother is doing. It is wrong. It is evil. And there is nothing I can do to stop it." Éloïse said nothing. What was there to say? "But I can do something else." Geneviève reached through the bars, pressing something small and cold into Éloïse's palm. "There is a healer in the Ashwood territory, an old woman named Clemence. She trained your father once. She knows about you, about what is happening. If you can escape, if you can somehow." "There is no escape." Éloïse looked down at the object in her hand. Small iron, unremarkable. "Even if I could open these bars, even if I could evade the guards, where would I go? I am 8 months pregnant. Can barely walk. And your brother," her voice cracked, "your brother will hunt me to the ends of the earth if I take this child from him." "Then don't take the child." Éloïse's head snapped up. Genevieve's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Let him take the baby, Éloïse. Let him believe he has one. And then when the execution comes." She reached through the bars again, this time pressing her fingers against Éloïse's wrist, against the pulse that beat steady and stubborn beneath the skin. "There is a potion. Clemence can make it. It slows the heart to almost nothing, mimics death so perfectly that even a physician cannot tell the difference. If you drink it before the execution, if you can survive for 1 hour underground." "You want me to let him kill me?" Éloïse whispered. "I want you to let him think he killed you." Genevieve's grip tightened. And then I want you to live, Eloise. Live and wait. Because this child, your child, will not remain in my brother's power forever. Children grow. They ask questions. And someday, this one will ask about its mother. And Gaspard will tell it that I was a traitor. Trespasser. A woman who tried to steal what did not belong to her. Maybe. Genevieve smiled, but it was sad knowing. Or maybe, when the time is right, someone will tell the truth. Someone who was there, who saw everything, who remembers the woman who loved so completely that she was destroyed by it. She stood, brushing the dust from her skirts, and Eloise saw that she was crying. Keep the key, Genevieve said. Not for now, I know you cannot use it now. But keep it as a promise. A promise that this is not the end. She was gone before Eloise could respond, vanishing into the darkness as quietly as she had come. Eloise closed her fingers around the key and, for the first time in months, allowed herself to hope. The name-burning ceremony took place the following evening. They dragged Eloise from her cell at sunset, forcing her to walk across the courtyard on legs that could barely hold her weight. The entire pack had assembled, 300 wolves standing in neat rows, their faces blank and unreadable. Gaspard stood before the ceremonial fire, the pack registry in his hands. Marguerite was beside him, one hand resting possessively on his arm, her expression somewhere between triumph and boredom. By the ancient rites, Gaspard began, and his voice echoed off the stone walls like a death knell. By the laws of our ancestors and the authority vested in me as Alpha of the Crescent Moon Pack, I hereby decree that this woman, he did not even look at her, has been found guilty of crimes against the pack, trespassing on Alpha territory, attempting to manipulate the succession, deceiving the Alpha into believing she held any legitimate claim to this pack or its resources. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but no one spoke. No one challenged him. Eloise had expected that. She had not expected it to hurt so much anyway. For these crimes, Gaspard continued, she is sentenced to death by execution, to be carried out 1 month after the birth of the heir she carries. Furthermore, he held up the registry, that ancient leather-bound book that contained the name of every wolf who had ever been part of this pack, stretching back 500 years. Her name is to be erased from our records. She will be forgotten. She will be nothing. It will be as though she never existed. He opened the book to a page near the back. Eloise could see her name from where she stood, written in the careful script of the pack scribe just 3 months ago, when Gaspard had formally, though secretly, recognized their mating. Éloïse Marchette, mate of Alpha Gaspard Beaumont. She had been so proud when she saw those words. Now she watched as Gaspard tore the page from the binding, as he held it over the ceremonial flame, as her name, her entire existence, caught fire and burned. She never existed, he repeated. She was never mated. She never carried my heir. And the crowd echoed back because that was the ritual, because that was the tradition, because they were too afraid to do anything else. She never existed. Eloise felt the bond between them strain and crack. Not break. That would require Gaspard to reject her formally, which he would never do, because rejection would acknowledge that the bond had been real. But crack, yes. Splinter. Become something thin and painful instead of the golden thread it had once been. She pressed her palm against her belly, where the baby kicked furiously, as if it could sense its mother's distress. They will remember my name, she thought again. And they will learn it from your lips. The birth came 3 weeks later. They brought a midwife to the cell, an older woman with cold hands and colder eyes, who performed her duties with mechanical efficiency and not a shred of compassion. The labor lasted 16 hours, and Eloise screamed until her throat bled, and the guards outside the door did not so much as turn their heads. Finally, the baby emerged into the world. Boy. Small and squalling, with a tuft of dark hair and the most perfect little fingers Eloise had ever seen. The midwife wrapped him in a blanket and moved toward the door without a word, and Eloise found a strength she did not know she possessed, surging forward, reaching, desperate. Please. Her voice was a ruin, barely more than a whisper. Please just let me hold him. Just for a moment. Please, I am his mother, I just want. The midwife paused. Éloïse saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt perhaps, or pity, or some long-buried memory of her own children. 1 minute, she said. That is all. She placed the baby in Éloïse's arms. He was so small, so impossibly, terrifyingly small. His eyes were closed. His face scrunched in displeasure at being forced into a world so cold and harsh. But when Éloïse touched his cheek, he turned toward her instinctively, seeking warmth, seeking comfort, seeking her. My little one, she breathed. My precious, perfect little one. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I cannot protect you. I am so sorry I cannot be there to watch you grow, to teach you, to love you the way you deserve to be loved. Tears streamed down her face, but she did not look away from him, not even to blink. But listen to me. Listen. Your name is Theodore. Theodore Marchette. Not Beaumont, never Beaumont. Marchette like me, like your grandfather, like the people who would have loved you if they had been given the chance. The baby opened his eyes. They were golden like his father's. But there was something else in them too, something that was purely Éloïse. Light, spark, promise. Remember your name, she whispered. And remember mine. Remember that your mother loved you more than life itself. Remember that she fought for you until the very end. And when you are old enough, when you are strong enough, she pressed a kiss to his forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of him, memorizing every detail. Make them remember too. The midwife took him away. And Éloïse collapsed onto the cold stone floor and wept. The execution was scheduled for the following month. But Genevieve's plan held. 3 days before she was meant to die, a servant brought Éloïse her evening meal. Thin gruel, a crust of bread, a cup of water. Éloïse ate without tasting, as she had done every day since they took her son. But when she lifted the cup to her lips, she caught a strange scent beneath the mineral tang of the water. Bitter almonds, wild thyme. Something else, something she could not identify but which made her wolf whine with unease. Potion. Éloïse drank it all. The effects began within minutes. Her heart slowed. Her vision dimmed. Her limbs grew heavy, then numb, then still. She felt herself slipping away, sinking into a darkness that was not quite death but was not quite life either. A space between, where time moved differently and sound came from very far away. She was aware, distantly, of guards entering her cell. Of hands checking her pulse, finding nothing. Of voices declaring her dead, a full 3 days ahead of schedule. Must have been the childbirth complications, you know how fragile these common wolves are, and dragging her body through the corridors, up the stairs, out of the pack house entirely. They buried her in the unmarked section of the cemetery, where criminals and traitors were laid to rest without ceremony or mourning. The earth was cold and damp around her, pressing against the thin shroud they had wrapped her in, and Éloïse felt the first stirrings of panic. 1 hour. Genevieve said 1 hour. I only need to survive for 1 hour. She focused on her son. Theodore. Somewhere in the pack house, probably in the nursery, being raised by strangers who would teach him to hate the memory of his mother. Learning to walk, to talk, to shift. Growing into a person she would never know. Shaped by a world she could not protect him from. But alive. He was alive. And as long as he was alive there was hope. The hour passed. Éloïse's heart stuttered back into rhythm. Her lungs expanded, desperate for air, and she clawed at the shroud, at the earth, at the weight pressing down on her from all sides. Dirt filled her mouth, her nose, her eyes. She could not breathe. She could not see. She was going to die for real this time. Suffocate in her own grave just when freedom was finally within reach. Hands reaching down, pulling, dragging her up into the night air. Genevieve. And beside her, an old woman with silver hair and knowing eyes who could only be Clemence. Breathe, the old woman commanded, pressing something bitter against Éloïse's lips. Breathe, child. You are not done yet. Éloïse breathed. And somewhere in the pack house, a baby woke from his slumber and cried for a mother who was no longer there. Theodore Beaumont was not like other wolves. He knew this the way he knew his own name, the way he knew the sun rose in the east and set in the west, The way he knew that the throne in his father's great hall was carved from the wood of a tree that had stood for 1,000 years. He was different. And everyone around him was determined to make sure he never forgot it. "Your mother was a traitor," Marguerite told him over and over, from the time he was old enough to understand the words. "A common healer's daughter who tried to trick your father into giving her power she did not deserve. She died in disgrace, unnamed and unmourned. And you should thank the moon goddess every day that your father had the grace to raise you despite the taint of her blood." Theodore learned to nod, to agree, to lower his eyes and murmur the appropriate words of gratitude and shame. But he never believed. There was something inside him, something that had been there for as long as he could remember, that knew the story was wrong. A voice that whispered in his darkest moments, when the loneliness threatened to swallow him whole. "You are loved. You were always loved. And someday you will understand." He did not know where the voice came from. He did not know whose it was. But he clung to it like a lifeline because without it, he thought he might drown. At 16, Theodore was tall and lean, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that shifted between gold and something deeper, something that people found unsettling. His wolf had manifested early. At 12, a full 2 years before most pups, and it was powerful, far more powerful than anyone had expected. "Alpha potential," the trainers whispered when they thought he could not hear. "Stronger than his father, perhaps. Stronger than any alpha in 3 generations." And Marguerite's eyes narrowed with hatred every time she looked at him. She had given Gaspard 3 children of her own, 2 daughters and a son, but they were weak, their wolves barely present, their connection to the alpha bloodline thin and attenuated. Beatrice, the eldest, could hardly hold a shift for more than an hour. Lucien, the only son, had not manifested his wolf at all, and at 14, the chances were growing slimmer by the day. Theodore was everything they were not. He was the heir. He was the future. And no amount of whispering about his mother's disgrace could change the fact that the pack recognized him, that his wolf called to theirs, that when he walked through the training grounds, even the most seasoned warriors lowered their heads in instinctive submission. He hated it. Not the power was a tool, nothing more, but the isolation. The way people looked at him with fear or resentment or desperate, calculating ambition. The way conversations stopped when he entered a room. The way even his half-siblings avoided him, Marguerite having poisoned them against him since birth. The only person who treated him like a normal person was his aunt. Genevieve had never married, had never taken a mate, had spent the last 16 years quietly managing the pack library and staying as far from politics as possible. But she had always made time for Theodore, teaching him to read when the tutors grew frustrated with his questions, bringing him books about the history of the packs, about the old ways, about the world beyond the borders of Crescent Moon territory, sitting with him in the garden on summer evenings, telling him stories that always seemed to have hidden meanings he could not quite grasp. "She loved you," Genevieve said one night, when Theodore was 15 and raging against the latest cruelty Marguerite had inflicted. Some cutting remark about how his blood was tainted, how he would never truly belong. Theodore froze. "Who?" "Your mother." Genevieve's voice was soft, careful, as if she were navigating a field of traps. "Whatever they tell you about her, whatever stories Marguerite has filled your head with, your mother loved you, Theodore. She loved you more than anything in this world. Then why did she leave me?" The words came out raw, jagged edges that cut his throat on the way up. "Why did she die without even trying to?" "She did not leave you." Genevieve took his hand, and he saw something fierce in her eyes, something that looked almost like grief. "She was taken from you. And she fought, Theodore. She fought until the very end. Never doubt that." He wanted to ask more. He wanted to demand answers, explanations, the truth that everyone seemed determined to hide from him. But before he could speak, footsteps echoed in the corridor, and Genevieve's expression shuttered. "We will speak more of this later," she murmured. "But for now, remember what I said. She loved you. And love like that does not simply vanish. Echoes. Endures. It finds a way." The truth found Theodore 3 months after his 16th birthday. He had been exploring the older sections of the pack house, dusty corridors that no one used anymore, storage rooms filled with forgotten artifacts, chambers that had been sealed since before his father's reign. He was looking for distraction mostly. Escape from the suffocating weight of expectation that followed him everywhere. Instead he found a letter. It was hidden in a crack between two stones, rolled tight and tied with a ribbon that had once been blue but had faded to gray with age. The paper was brittle, crumbling at the edges, and the handwriting was small and careful and completely unfamiliar. "My dearest Theodore," it began. "If you are reading this, then Genevieve has kept her promise. I knew she would. She is the only good thing left in your father's bloodline, and I hope, I pray, that she has been kind to you in my absence. I do not know how old you are now. I do not know what they have told you about me. I imagine they have said terrible things. Your father is not a man who tolerates loose ends, and I was the loosest end of all. A common woman who dared to love him, who dared to believe that love might be enough. It was not enough. I understand that now. But my love for you, that is different. That is the one thing I am certain of, in a world where certainty has become impossible. They told you I was a traitor, schemer, a woman who tried to manipulate her way into power. But listen to me, my son. Listen carefully. I never wanted power. I never wanted the throne or the crown or any of the trappings of royalty. All I ever wanted was you. And when they tried to take you from me, I fought. I fought with everything I had. And when fighting was no longer possible, I survived. I survived so that someday I might see your face again. I am alive, Theodore. By the time you read this, I will be far from Crescent Moon territory, somewhere your father cannot find me. I cannot tell you where. I cannot risk the possibility that this letter falls into the wrong hands, but I want you to know that I am out there, waiting, hoping, loving you from a distance, because that is the only way I know how to love you now. When you are ready, when you are strong enough, old enough, wise enough to make your own choices, find me. Ask Genevieve. She will know. And until then, remember this. Your name is Theodore Marchette. Not Beaumont, never Beaumont. Marchette like me, like your grandfather, like the people who would have loved you if they had been given the chance. Remember your name. Remember mine. And make them remember too. All my love now and forever. Your mother, Éloïse Marchette. Theodore read the letter 3 times. Then he sat very still in the darkness and let the pieces of his broken world rearrange themselves into something new, something sharper, something with edges that caught the light. His mother was alive. His mother loved him. His mother's name was Éloïse Marchette, and she had been erased. Not because she was a traitor, but because she was inconvenient. Because she threatened the careful political alliance his father had built with Marguerite's family. Because she was a common woman who had dared to be loved. Everything they had told him was a lie. Everything. Theodore folded the letter carefully, tucked it against his heart, and went to find Genevieve. His aunt was in the library, as she usually was at this hour, surrounded by stacks of ancient texts and the comfortable smell of old paper. She looked up when he entered, and something in his face made her go very still. "You found it," she said. It was not a question. "She is alive." Theodore's voice was steady, but barely. "My mother is alive. You knew. You have known all along. And you let me believe. You let everyone believe. I let you survive." Genevieve rose from her chair, crossed the room to close the door. "Do you have any idea what your father would do if he knew? If he even suspected that Éloïse survived the execution? He would hunt her down, Theodore. He would burn the world to find her. And he would kill anyone who helped her, including me. Including you. So you lied. I protected. There is a difference." Theodore laughed, and there was no humor in it. Is there? Is there really? Because from where I am standing, it looks exactly the same." Genevieve flinched, but she did not look away. "Your mother is alive," she said quietly. "She has been living in the Ashwood territory for the last 16 years, under the protection of a healer named Clemence. She has built a new life there, a quiet life, a safe life. And she has been waiting, Theodore. Waiting for you. I want to see her. I know. I want to see her now. That is not possible. Genevieve held up a hand before he could protest. Your father is already watching you more closely than you realize. You are his heir. His only viable heir, despite Marguerite's best efforts, and he will not let you slip away. If you try to leave the territory, if you give him any reason to suspect, then what am I supposed to do? Theodore's composure cracked, and beneath it was something raw, something wounded. Just wait. Just sit here and smile and pretend everything is fine while my mother is out there alone. She is not alone. Genevieve's voice softened. She has people who care for her. A life that, while not the one she would have chosen, is at least safe. And she would not want you to risk yourself for her, Theodore. That is not why she survived. She survived so that you could live, freely, fully, as the man you were meant to be. And what kind of man is that? The question came from somewhere deep inside him, a place he had not known existed until this moment. A man who sits on a throne built on lies. A man who inherits power from a father who destroyed everything good in his life. A man who forgets. Genevieve was quiet for a long moment. No, she said finally. Not that kind of man. Different kind. The kind who remembers. The kind who, when the time comes, makes things right. And when will that time come? She met his eyes, and he saw something in her expression that he had never seen before. Hope, fierce and fragile. Sooner than you think. The next 3 years passed both slowly and all at once. Theodore grew into his power. Trained with the warriors until his body was a weapon. Studied the old laws, the ancient treaties, the loopholes and technicalities that governed pack politics. He learned to play the game his father played, to smile when he wanted to snarl, to hide his true thoughts behind a mask of perfect obedience. And all the while he planned. Genevieve was his only ally within the pack, but she proved to be worth a dozen warriors. She smuggled information to and from the Ashwood territory. She kept Theodore informed of his mother's well-being. Healthy, she reported. Settled, even happy in her quiet way. And she began laying the groundwork for what was to come. The pack is not as unified as your father believes, she told him one night, when they were certain they would not be overheard. There are factions. Wolves who remember how things were before Marguerite, before the political marriages and the burning of names. Wolves who remember your mother, who knew her, spoke with her, saw the truth of what happened. Will they support me? When the time comes. But the time must be right. You cannot challenge your father until you have reached your majority. Until then, you are still legally under his authority. Any attempt to move against him will be crushed, Theodore finished. I know. You have told me. I tell you because it is important. Genevieve reached out, touched his cheek, and there was something maternal in the gesture, something that made his heart ache. You are playing a dangerous game, nephew. The stakes are higher than you can imagine. The stakes are everything, Theodore replied. My mother's name. My mother's life. The truth of what happened 16 years ago. If that is not worth the risk. He shook his head. Then nothing is. Theodore turned 19 on the longest night of the year. By tradition, the heir to an Alpha pack received their formal recognition on their 19th birthday. A ceremony that marked their transition from child to adult, from dependent to independent, from subject to potential successor. It was also the moment when Theodore could finally, legally, make his move. The great hall was filled to capacity. Every wolf in the territory had been commanded to attend. A show of strength, Gaspard had said, a demonstration of the pack's unity and power. But Theodore knew the truth. His father was scared. Marguerite's children had failed to manifest any significant power. Lucien's wolf had never appeared at all, a shameful secret that the packhouse struggled to contain. The political alliance with the Delacroix family was crumbling, their trade routes contested by rival packs, their influence waning by the year. Gaspard needed Theodore. Needed him to be obedient, manageable, grateful. Needed him to forget the mother who had been burned from the records and embrace the future Gaspard had designed for him. Tonight, Gaspard would learn just how badly he had miscalculated. "We gather," Gaspard announced, his voice echoing through the hall, "to recognize the coming of age of Theodore Beaumont, heir to the Crescent Moon Pack, son of my blood and bearer of my legacy." Theodore stood before the throne, that ancient seat of power, carved from the heartwood tree 1,000 years ago, still carrying the marks of every alpha who had sat upon it. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, the expectations of generations past and present. But he could also feel something else. His mother's letter, tucked against his heart as it had been for 3 years. Her voice, whispering across the distance. "Remember your name, remember mine, and make them remember too." "Do you, Theodore Beaumont," Gaspard continued, "accept the responsibilities of your bloodline? Do you swear to uphold the laws of this pack, to protect its members, to carry forward its legacy into the generations to come?" The hall was silent. 300 wolves watching, waiting. Theodore took a breath. "No," he said. The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water, ripples spreading outward, touching everyone it reached. Gaspard's face went white. "What did you say?" "I said no." Theodore's voice was clear, steady, carrying to every corner of the hall. "I do not accept the responsibilities of the Beaumont bloodline, because the Beaumont bloodline is not mine. I do not swear to uphold the laws of this pack, because those laws are built on lies. And I do not carry forward this legacy." He turned to face the assembled wolves, and his eyes blazed gold. "Because this legacy is one of cruelty, betrayal, and the destruction of innocent lives." "You dare!" Gaspard's voice shook with rage. "You ungrateful, after everything I have done for you. Everything you have done." Theodore laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut. "You tore me from my mother's arms before I was an hour old. You erased her name from the pack records as though she had never existed. You built this dynasty on her grave, and then you lied about it over and over for 19 years. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispers rose and fell like waves. "My name," Theodore continued, "is not Beaumont. My name is Marchette. Theodore Marchette, son of Éloïse Marchette, the woman you tried to destroy. And I stand before you tonight to tell you the truth that was burned, buried, erased, but never forgotten." He reached into his coat, pulled out his mother's letter and something else. A stack of papers, bound with cord, covered in Genevieve's careful handwriting. "These are the testimonies of 17 wolves who witnessed the events of 19 years ago. Wolves who saw my mother arrive at this packhouse as an honored mate, only to be thrown into a cell when she refused to submit to my father's schemes. Wolves who remember her name being burned, who were forced to chant she never existed, while their alpha committed murder in everything but name." He threw the papers at Gaspard's feet. "The truth does not burn, father. Survives. Wait. And eventually." He smiled, and there was nothing soft in it. "It rises." What happened next would be remembered for generations. Gaspard launched himself at Theodore, shifting mid-leap. His wolf enormous and black and radiating fury. It was an alpha challenge, the ancient right by which leadership was contested, power transferred through blood and violence. Theodore shifted too. His wolf was white. Pure white, like snow, like moonlight, like the rarest and most sacred wolves of legend. And it was massive. Larger than Gaspard's, larger than any wolf the pack had seen in living memory. They clashed in the center of the hall, teeth and claws and the raw force of 2 alphas fighting for dominance. Gaspard was experienced, ruthless, driven by desperation and rage. But Theodore was young, powerful, and fueled by something his father had never understood. Love. Not the twisted possessive thing Gaspard called love, but the real thing, the kind that endured, that survived burning and burial, that echoed across years and miles and whispered you are worth fighting for. The battle lasted 7 minutes. When it was over, Gaspard lay broken on the floor of his own great hall, blood pooling beneath him, and Theodore stood over him, still in wolf form, his white fur stained red. "Submit," he growled, the word somehow clear despite the wolf's throat. Gaspard's wolf whined, ears flattened, belly pressed to the ground. The submission was instinctive, undeniable, the recognition of a stronger alpha, a more worthy leader. Theodore shifted back to his human form, and his voice rang out across the silent hall. By the ancient rights of the Crescent Moon Pack, I claim this throne, claim this pack, and my first act as Alpha. He strode toward the great carved chair that had held power for 1,000 years, is to restore what was stolen. He extended his claws, longer and sharper than they had any right to be, and began to carve. The wood split under his touch, ancient and sacred, yielding to his will as though it had been waiting for this moment all along. Letter by letter, word by word, he carved his mother's name into the throne. Éloïse Marchette. Each stroke was a declaration, each letter a reclamation, each word a promise fulfilled. When he finished, Theodore stepped back, breathing hard, his hands bloodied from the work. The pack stared at the throne, at the name that now dominated its surface, impossible to ignore, impossible to erase. She existed, Theodore said quietly. She was mated. She carried the heir. And now? He turned to face his wolves, his pack, the people who would follow him into whatever future he chose to build. She will never be forgotten again. The cottage in Ashwood territory was small but well kept, surrounded by a garden of medicinal herbs that perfumed the air with lavender and rosemary. Smoke curled from the chimney, and warm light spilled from the windows, creating a bubble of warmth against the cold winter evening. Theodore paused at the gate, suddenly uncertain. He had planned this moment for years, had dreamed of it, longed for it, worked toward it with every breath. But now that it was here, now that he was standing just steps away from the mother he had never known, he found himself frozen. What if she did not recognize him? What if she had changed too much, or he had, and the connection between them had faded to nothing? What if? The door opened. A woman stood in the doorway, small, dark-haired, with eyes that he saw every time he looked in a mirror. She was older than he had imagined, lines around her eyes, silver threading through her hair. But she was beautiful, she was alive, and she was looking at him as though he was the answer to every prayer she had ever whispered. "Theodore," she breathed. He was across the garden before he knew he was moving, sweeping her into his arms, holding her as though she might disappear if he let go. She was crying, he was crying, and the words spilled out of them both, years of longing and grief and desperate hope finally given voice. "You found me," Éloïse whispered against his chest. "You remembered. I never forgot." Theodore pulled back just enough to look at her face, to memorize every line and curve and imperfection. "I never forgot, Mother. Not even when they tried to make me. Not even when they burned your name. I kept you here." He pressed a hand to his heart. "Always." Éloïse reached up, touched his cheek, and her smile was radiant despite the tears. "And now?" Theodore thought of the throne back in Crescent Moon territory. His throne now, with his mother's name carved into its surface for all eternity. He thought of the pack that was learning to trust him, the reforms he had already begun, the wolves who came to him with hope in their eyes for the first time in a generation. "Now," he said, "I take you home." The ceremony to officially restore Éloïse Marchette's name to the pack records took place on the first day of spring. Every wolf in the territory attended, not because they were commanded but because they wanted to. They wanted to witness this moment, this righting of an ancient wrong, this proof that the new Alpha was different from the old. Theodore stood before the ceremonial fire, the same fire that had once consumed his mother's name, and held the new registry open. Page was blank, waiting. "By the laws of this pack," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard, "and by my authority as Alpha, I hereby reinstate Éloïse Marchette to full membership in the Crescent Moon Pack. She is recognized as the true mate of the former Alpha, as the mother of the current Alpha, and as a wolf of honor, courage, and love beyond measure." He wrote her name himself, each letter careful and deliberate. Éloïse Marchette, mate of Alpha Gaspard Beaumont, mother of Alpha Theodore Marchette, Luna Emerita of the Crescent Moon Pack. When he finished, he turned to his mother, who stood beside him, dressed in silver and white, tears streaming down her face, and took her hand. "Welcome home," he said simply. And the pack echoed back, 300 voices rising as one. "Welcome home." That night, after the celebrations had ended and the torches had burned low, Éloïse walked through the corridors of the pack house, relearning the paths she had once known so well. Eventually, she found herself in the great hall, standing before the throne. Her name stared back at her, carved into the ancient wood, impossible to ignore. She traced the letters with trembling fingers. "You did this," she whispered, feeling Theodore's presence behind her before she heard his footsteps. "You remembered. You told me to." He came to stand beside her, looking up at the throne with an expression she could not quite read. "In your letter, you said to remember my name and yours, and to make them remember too. I did not think it would be like this." Éloïse's voice cracked. "I did not think, I never imagined." "Neither did I." Theodore wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "But here we are." "Here we are," she agreed. They stood together in the darkness, mother and son, looking at the throne where her name was now written forever. The throne that had been built on power and cruelty, but which now bore the mark of something stronger. Love. The kind that survived burning. The kind that echoed across years and miles and impossible odds. The kind that tiny claws had carved into history, one letter at a time. And that, dear listeners, is the story of how Éloïse Marchette was burned from the pack records, and how her son carved her name into the throne with his tiny claws. But I have to ask you because I truly want to know. Did this story touch your heart the way it touched mine? Did you feel Éloïse's despair in that cell? Did you feel Theodore's rage when he learned the truth? Did you feel the hope burning through all that darkness, refusing to die? If you did, if you are sitting there right now with tears in your eyes and a heart full of something you cannot quite name, then do me one favor. One small favor that will mean the world to me. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button. And drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from so I can send you a virtual hug. Because we are all part of this story now. Connected by these words, by these emotions, by the simple magic of a tale well told. And if you want more stories like this one, more tales of love and loss and impossible redemption, then stay with me. Stay right here. Because I have so many more stories to tell, and I want to tell them to you. Until next time, my dear wolves. May your names never be forgotten. May your stories always be told. And may love, real love, the kind that survives everything, find you wherever you are.